Just a note before we start, we shot this video back in June of 2019, so some of this information may not be so up to date. A little bit more of the information at the end of the video, or you can check out the link in the description box below for more information on our website. What is the quintessential cheap eats when you're in Japan? Ramen. There's a ton of different types, from different flavors of the broth, regional variations, and different thicknesses of the noodles. There's even the cheapest of the cheap cup instant ramens, and also the top of the top Michelin stars. And what's been blowing up recently? A combination of both, the Michelin star cup ramen. We don't particularly believe that the cup ramen itself has a Michelin star, but it's supposed to be very close to the original. How close is it to the original? Well, that's what we're gonna test out. So the first ramen we tried out was from a restaurant called Tsuta. They're the first Michelin star ramen in all of Japan. The soy sauce and the salt one are completely different in flavor. The soy sauce one is quite nice. It's very rich and very meaty in flavor, almost sweet because of the soy sauce and the umami flavor. It tastes a lot like mushrooms and soy sauce. It's very meaty, though we can't be sure which meat it's actually from. Probably pork, unsure. In the case of the salt one, they use a clam base, and even though it's so light, it's like clear in color. It's so strong with the clam flavor. It's not as salty as I thought it would be. It's also not fatty, and despite how clear it is, it's a very flavorful broth. The noodles are quite nice. They're very chewy. It's a medium thickness and very straight. We found the Tsuta cup ramen in pretty much most of the 7-Elevens we went to. They're famous for a soy sauce based ramen, but in this case, the salt based one is actually the one that's made into a cup ramen. Salt, Tsuta ramen. I think the instructions, I translated it before. It says to remove the soup sachet from the lid, and then pour in hot water to the line, cover it for 4 minutes, then add that special soup base back on top, and then enjoy. Let's try it. It really smells like clams, although a little bit artificial maybe. Let's try the soup first. They got the clam flavor. They did. It's quite surprising. At first, it tastes a little like the spring onions inside. Okay, let's try the noodles. So while they have the clam flavor really good, really down pat, you can tell it's slightly on the artificial side. So there is quite a bit of saltiness in there compared to the actual ramen, which was really not salty at all, even though we ate through the whole thing. While the broth is the same, the noodles are basic instant noodles. So although you get the flavor of the soup really well, the noodles' different texture actually changes the flavor of the ramen soup a little bit. I don't think you can fully replicate the noodles though, because Tsuta makes their noodles in store by hand by themselves. In terms of does it taste like the actual Michelin ramen, I guess if you've never had the real bowl of noodles, it's pretty damn good. But it's not exactly the same. Still, I'm not mad. No, this is one of the most high quality instant cup ramens. It's like the taste of the clams is so delicious. Any regrets for you? I personally don't think I have any. Honestly, this was a very fun experience. Quite good. If you don't have time to try the original, then the cup ramen is a really good alternative. Like, I can't be disappointed. You can't make it perfect. I'm happy. Be careful that Tsuta has a numbering system to decide which order people come in. You actually go into the restaurant and get a number using a 1,000 yen deposit per person, which they'll give back to you when you actually go in and eat. You get a 1-hour slot for the ideal time you should come. It does mean that you should go in early to get a seat number that you want, and even then, when you do turn up on your time slot, you actually still have to wait to make sure that you can get in. We actually went in 15 minutes before opening time, but we were lucky that it was A, raining, B, a weekday, and C, not high season. So we actually managed to get a 12 o'clock slot. They advised us to come in between 12 and 12:30, but we didn't actually start eating till 12:30. We went there at 11:45 to re-queue, but yes, we didn't start eating till 12:30 easily. So that is quite a word of warning for those who want to try this particular ramen. It is a very strange system. We did realize that the later it is, the fewer people came in. It's probably better to expect a time closer to 2 o'clock, or even come in for dinner. They don't have a ticketing system for dinner, so it's just a first come first serve basis, which I think is much more reasonable and simple. Right, so we're actually at home. We didn't realize that there are two different kinds of tsuta instant ramen in the convenience stores. We assumed that the salt ramen was sold in both the small thin cups and the flat wide cups. But we realized basically on the last day we had in Japan that they were different, so we brought the soy sauce one home to try with us. You're supposed to make it by peeling the lid back to the line, put the dry seasoning sachet, which has the spring onion and the pork, into the noodles, pour in hot water to the line, cover the lid, and then after 5 minutes, pour in the seasoning sauces and the bamboo shoots, and you're ready to go. I believe that Suta's specialty is the soy sauce one, but I've read that a lot of people prefer their salt ones. I actually like the soy sauce one better from memory, but like in a different way from how I like the salt one. This one smells really good. For some reason, I think it's because of the soy sauce. It's got a bit of molasses smell, like a caramelized smell. It smells like rotisserie chicken to me. I can kind of see that. It's really odd, like soy sauce chicken. Soy sauce and chicken. Let's try it. We realized with the first tuto one, the texture of the noodles isn't exactly the same. The texture of those noodles are really good. The soup is quite nice. I forgot to try this one. I think I like the texture of this noodle more than I like the texture of the salt one, which to me was a little bit floury. The flavor is not incredibly strong. I feel like maybe it was stronger in the restaurant, but it is pretty complex, this one. And the spring onions are surprisingly natural tasting. I think it's a pretty good soy sauce flavor. There's a little bit of sweetness. Maybe we can't say anything fully because it's been a while since we had the Michelin-starred ramen. The ramen is definitely better, but this is a pretty damn good instant noodle. If I went back to Japan, which I guess wouldn't be anytime soon, I would not really go to Michelin-starred ramens. I would try a whole bunch of different ones, but if I really wanted to bring these home, they're easy and accessible. Nakiru's most famous dish is the tantanmen, which is their take on the Chinese dandanmen. It is a spicy soup noodles with sesame paste and red pepper. What's interesting about their one is that it's a clear broth underneath it, and they chuck in a whole bunch of, like a spoonful of fat on top, which floats at the surface, and then when you mix the noodles in, the fat sort of melts throughout the whole thing, and it becomes this gorgeous creamy layer on the surface. It's super tasty. It's got a lot of umami from the mince and also the sesame paste. And also they put in roasted crushed peanuts, which makes it so nutty. It's so rich in flavor, and it was honestly completely different to what I imagined it to be like. I think it's really different from normal Chinese tantanmen. If you can't eat spicy food, it is a little bit spicy, but it doesn't really build up the more you eat. I would try their spicier tantanmen. They also have a tsukemen, which is the dipping version of the tantanmen, and like a sour spicy version, which also sounds delightful. Otherwise, they do have a salt and a soy sauce version. We decided to get the soy sauce for the second option. That was pretty good too. It was so strong in the pork flavor. But unfortunately, because the tantanmen was so rich, it just became a little bit lacking for us personally after eating the rich tantanmen. Saying that, this one had an amazing broth. It was light.
it tasted mostly of soy sauce. It doesn't have such a heavy salty flavor that you'd expect out of a soy sauce broth.
The noodles are also completely different to, I think, pretty much every other ramen we've had in Japan so far. It's very, very thin, but quite firm. And because it's so thin, it sort of softens up as you eat it, and by the end, it's quite a nice, light, firm chew.
For Nakiryu's instant noodles, they did their signature tantanmen.
Nakiryu, I think, is the one that's the most famous for the instant ramen version, because I think they were the first ones to come out with the cup ramen.
This is the one that you can find pretty much in any 7-Eleven convenience store.
Nakiryu's instant noodle is a little bit more complicated. So first, you peel back half the lid and remove 3 sachets.
Whoa, that's so bougie.
Then you pour in the powdered sachet, and then pour in the hot water up to the line, and keep the liquid seasonings warm on the lid while you cook it. Then after 3 minutes, loosen up the noodles, add the liquid soup, mix well, and then add the paste seasoning. So they've actually got like 4 different steps.
Not quite so instant, but let's give it a go.
So I get why you need to pour in the paste last. It's because it imitates the floating fat on top of the other one. It smells delightful. It smells so savory. Oh, it smells really good.
It might smell like peanut butter to those who've never really smelled what sesame paste is.
They got the thinness of the noodles down pat. Let's try the soup first. Oh, I think the spiciness is pretty much exactly spot on. It's like that spicy, just a little bit, and then it doesn't get any spicier than this.
Not too salty, which is pretty much similar to the original. And the sesame sauce, that flavor is right there too.
Let's try the noodles. I get why this is only 3 minutes. Because actually the texture of the noodles is pretty much very, very, very similar to the original one. Like, it's so thin but very, very firm. Maybe it's got less of a chew because it is, after all, an instant noodle. But, I mean, I'm not mad. That's pretty spot on.
The soup clings onto the noodles quite well.
The Nakiryu tantanmen was one of my favorite ramen so far that we've had in Japan. So the fact that this is so similar makes me get why a lot of people enjoy this so much and buy so many of these to take home with them.
For its price, there is really nothing to fault with this. The flavor is very accurate. The noodles are an amazing texture, even more so than suta. And there's even pork mince in here.
Nakiryu, the actual tantanmen, surprised me. This one surprised me in a completely different way. Again, it's not super exactly like the original one, but I'm not mad at it.
I'm quite impressed at how close it is.
Any regrets for you?
Obviously not.
I loved Nakiryu's tantanmen, and this one, if this means that I can have a very similar dish back at home without having to come all the way to Japan for it, I'm all for this. Next up we have konjiki hototoki soup.
They have 2 styles, the soy sauce and the salt one. The soy sauce one is
like in Tsuta, it's their signature, but the salt one made it to the ramen, the cup ramen version. I quite like their signature soy sauce one. It was very nice. It says that they have a triple soup for the soy sauce, which consists of a complex yet delicate broth made from pork, wadashi Japanese stock, and hamaguri clam.
couldn't taste the clams, unfortunately.
I don't think so, but it was a little bit richer and a little bit more full-bodied perhaps than the salt one. Personally, I prefer the soy sauce one. I think a lot of people actually prefer the salt one from what I've read. But it is basically all preference. In either case, the salt one has 2 types of salt, Mongolian rock salt and natural Okinawan sea salt. It also has Italian white truffle oil and homemade porcini mushroom duxelle, pancetta bacon bits, and an Inca berry sauce.
Really?
Because it did come with a lot of little toppings that we mixed in. I think we just didn't taste each component individually before we started eating it. The salt one was the saltiest ramen that we had out of all the Michelin stars.
It wasn't like horribly salty.
It definitely wasn't.
It was just a little step up from the others. The clams are stronger in flavor in the suta compared to this one, but it was still tasty.
Okay, so with making this one from konjiki hototoki soup, It says to peel back half the lid, remove the soups, pour in 2 kayaku sachets. I think it might be like powder or dry stuff. Pour in water to the line, heat the liquid soup on the lid, then after 4 minutes, pour the special and liquid soups and mix in well.
It's done.
It's done. And for some reason it smells like coconut or like a curry broth. I'm not sure, it smells sweet. Let's try it. Now it has been a couple days since we ate this one as compared to last time when we ate it on the evening. But it does taste kind of like what I remember it to. Sort of like clam and seafood flavor.
But the mushroom flavor is incredibly strong in this one.
More so than the actual ramen. Surprised. Although, yeah, it might still be because it's been a couple nights since we've had this one. Let's try the noodles. Even though it's 4 minutes, it's still a bit firmer.
The texture of these noodles are quite nice. It is actually more reminiscent of a real restaurant ramen noodle texture than the other two we've had so far.
I think so, possibly. Is it similar? To be honest, like, I remember it being different. I don't know why, and I don't know if it's seriously, genuinely because it's been a while since we've had it.
I quite like these noodles.
Because it has a blend of mushrooms and seafood, it's a lot more complex. And it's really not as salty as I expected either. All of them so far have been amazing for instant noodles. And it's because they're so similar to the actual Michelin ramen.
Try it. Why does it taste like fruit jerky? But then, like, after you chew it, it tastes like meat.
Vaguely. That might just be the processing. I mean, who knows?
Oh well, on to the next one.
Last one.
The last one you say? You just said that there was only 3 Michelin-starred ramen.
Oh, well, there is also a Bib Gourmand gut ramen. Hey!
Hey!
Ramen Yamaguchi really only have 2 main dishes, which is their chicken-based ramen and their chicken-based dipping ramen.
We thought that'd be exactly the same, so we were aiming to get their seasonal special. Unfortunately, they didn't have that, so we had to get the sukemen, but they're actually quite different.
In terms of the chicken ramen, it was way more full-bodied than I expected. In fact, when I first took a sip, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of like a nice light broth. But then the more I drank it, it became sort of like richer and moreish.
It seemed like they roasted the bones. There was a strong miredized flavor.
It was roasty. Very rounded and roasty. I enjoyed it so much more than I expected. By the time we'd finished the actual noodles, I was still drinking the soup. The tsukemen is also highly recommended. The noodles, I believe, are a little bit thicker, and it has a bit of a vinegar flavor, so I think that cuts down how cold the noodles are.
The sauce is topped with spring onions and chili, but it's not spicy. There is a spicy version, which is available. It kind of just gives a little tingle.
I really liked the tsukemen as well.
It's quite refreshing. And it's a lot lighter than the soup noodles. But it has the same kind of complex chicken flavor, mostly overlying with vinegar. So if you want to focus on the soup, definitely go for the ramen. But if you want a kind of a light summer vibe, then definitely recommend the sukemen.
Or definitely try their seasonal special if you manage to get it. Maybe it's only for dinner, we don't know.
This is the most
difficult to find, I think.
Yeah, it's very elusive. We only found it twice, and they were in 2 different convenience stores.
We found it randomly wandering around in a daily Yamazaki and later once in a Lawson. And that was in a space of the months that we were here. So if you don't manage to get this one, it makes sense. We make it same as the other one actually. Peel back the lid to half and remove the sachets.
There are wontons in there.
Pour in the kayaku, the dried stuff, and then pour hot water to the line. After 4 minutes, pour in the liquid soup and mix well. Cool. This one only came with 1 soup sachet, but I think it's because Ramen Yamaguchi didn't have too many components to it. Let's try it. Broth first. There's the roast chicken flavor. Ooh. Again, better than I expected. The smell throws you off because it smells so much like instant noodle.
It smells really salty too.
And then the taste is quite rounded. Okay, let's try the noodles. This one is yellower, definitely yellower than the other one we had. I think because it's supposed to be like an eggier noodle, it has more of a chew to it, even though it's still a firm noodle. You notice it's like more bouncy chew. It's incredible that even the texture of the ramen is different for all of them.
It's actually quite nice.
Wow. Even the spring onions taste very fragrant.
I'm gonna try the wonton. It looks like there's 4, but in terms of the meat, there's like
Not too much.
the skin is nice. It's slippery. There's a bit of a ginger flavor. You can barely feel the meat, like forget about the meat. Just the flavor that comes out of it is quite strong.
Unfortunately, we didn't actually taste the wontons at the actual restaurant.
No, we were cheap and got like the basic ramen, but I kind of wish we did.
Overall, delicious. Not as complex as the real ramen, but still really, really good for an instant noodle. It's got the roast chicken flavor, definitely.
I like it. I really like this one.
I actually think that this one doesn't have a Michelin simply because it's a lot simpler than the other ones. It doesn't have all the little, you know, truffle oil, duxelles, reduction of whatever. It's just simply the broth, the noodles, and your meat. And it's maybe too simple for a Michelin star. Who knows?
Out of the 4 ramen that I've had, I might like this one the most.
Really? I like nakiryu simply because I think it's most suited to my taste. I like the nutty flavor.
But all of them are good. When you think about all the components that are in each of them, they're very different from each other. In terms of Michelin stars, how did these ones get Michelin stars? Of course, nobody really knows how the Michelin star process works. It still remains a mystery, and I think they will keep it like that forever. In terms of whether you should go out of your way to have a Michelin star, personally, for me, no.
Because here's the thing. I don't believe that any of these 4 ramen were my favorite ramen per se out of all the ones I've had in Japan. And it's simply because when you're looking for ramen, you kind of want like a really hearty, traditional, thick soup kind of ramen, right? For New Zealand, for us, if we're like, oh, we want fish and chips, we just go down to the local takeaway and we get a nice piece of fish and some chips. They might not be the best quality, but it's sort of good, homey, you know, delicious. It's comfort food. You don't really want to go to like a fancy restaurant all the time and have like the best fish in the world and like the super like 100,000 components to it. And I think that's what makes it like not necessarily the best. Don't get us wrong, these are all amazing, amazing ramens. There's so many components to it. It tastes so different and so complex and rich, and you can taste how well crafted each bowl is.
These 4-cup ramens alone are so different in flavor from each other. How can you say that it is above all of the ones that taste completely different from these ones again?
I mean, if you go into a Michelin star ramen place, you also have to go in with a sort of objectivity. And that's, I think, one of the biggest flaws of the Michelin system. Like, it's only one guide system, one rating system, and there are a lot out there. Like, if you go onto Google, there's a ton that would recommend you great ramen places. And if you go onto Tabeilog, which is the local Japanese Yelp, so to speak, anything above 3.5 is pretty good. Anything closer to a 4 is really, really excellent. To tie it up, is it worth it going to Michelin star ramen? If you want to,
yes,
go for it.
If you just want a really good bowl of ramen,
if your tastes are closer to the rich, pork, heavy, traditional style ramen,
then they don't actually have that available as a Michelin. If Michelin star ramen is not your first priority of restaurant to go to, then just pick up a couple of bowls of noodles and see how it goes. But otherwise, wherever you're staying in your neighborhood, there's always, always, always a good ramen, a good soba, a good udon, because they're cheap eats.
Anyway, once more, As to where you can find all this information that we mentioned, including the locations of the restaurants and the prices of these cup ramens, you can look on our website, which will be linked in the description below.
As to where we are now, follow us on Instagram at TwinSpeakEatGo. See you next time.
Go eat tons of ramen.
Watch out for the salt content,
Yeah,
please.
don't drink all the soup.
As we mentioned, the video was shot in 2019 in around June. And Suta was the first ramen store we went to for Michelin-starred, and it was the first ramen restaurant to be awarded a Michelin-starred, but it actually lost its star in 2020.
And honestly, what does that even mean? Is the broth no longer clean and complex? Is the noodle no longer its perfect, wonderful, chewy texture? Is there no longer passion in the cooking or quality to the ingredients?
Yeah, that's probably not the case, and that's what makes following Michelin guides really, really tricky. Their scoring system is so elusive that the average person or even the biggest foodie can really only speculate how a decision is made for Michelin stars to be added or removed.
And even so, what is good to the Michelin judges will probably be completely different to how a dish is received by the average person. Again, if you're looking for something exceptional and out of the ordinary, then go for it. But if you're looking for a traditional fatty pork broth, then honestly the ramen shop that's around the corner of your hostel or hotel or Airbnb might just hit the spot. As with any form of judging, the Michelin guide is a really complex system and should really be only viewed as that, a guide, and taken with a grain of salt.
With that being said, are you willing to go out of your way to try a Michelin star bowl of ramen, or would the instant cup version be enough for you? Let us know in the comments below.
In any case, all of this information can be found on our website, which will be linked in the description box below, as usual.
If you're thinking of going to Japan, we highly recommend getting a Japan Rail Pass for stress-free travel. Check out the description box below for our video guide on how to choose and use the best JR Pass for your travel style. By using our affiliate link, you help to support small creators like us to produce more content for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!